April 28, 1945, Halbe, Germany, a village of 400 people 30 miles south of Berlin. General Theodor Busse stood in the command post of the German Ninth Army, surrounded by maps showing red lines that formed a noose. Around the table, his staff officers, veterans of Stalingrad, Kursk, and 100 other battles, stared at the encirclement with the professional understanding of men who knew exactly what those lines meant. They were trapped, completely. Behind Soviet lines, 200,000 souls. Not just soldiers, but 30,000 women, children, and elderly caught when the Soviet pincers closed. The Spree Forest had become the world's largest prison. The mathematics were inescapable. Marshal Zhukov's first Belarusian front to the north, 140,000 men, 4,200 artillery pieces. Marshal Konev's first Ukrainian front to the south, 140,000 men, 3,200 artillery pieces. Between them, 280,000 Soviet troops with one mission: complete annihilation of the Ninth Army. Soviet commanders calculated 72 hours, 3 days to crush 100,000 trapped Germans and 30,000 civilians. The Red Army had done it before at Stalingrad, at Minsk. Encircled armies died. It was the mathematics of modern warfare. But General Busse was about to rewrite those mathematics. Berlin, 12 miles north, was dying. Hitler's order was clear: the Ninth Army will break through to Berlin and relieve the capital. An impossible command, a death sentence disguised as strategy. Busse looked at his officers and spoke words that would condemn him as a traitor, but save tens of thousands. We break through to the west, all of us, soldiers and civilians together. We don't fight to save Berlin. We fight to reach the Americans before the Soviets take us all. What happened next was the largest breakout attempt in military history. Over 7 days, 100,000 German soldiers and 30,000 civilians would fight through 3 Soviet armies in a corridor of death 8 miles long. 40,000 would die. The forest would become Germany's largest war cemetery. The village of Halbe would be obliterated completely. But 25,000 soldiers and 30,000 civilians would escape. They would prove that even trapped armies could break free if willing to pay the terrible price. This is the Battle of Halbe. History buried it because nobody was supposed to survive. The Soviets wanted it forgotten, a trapped army that refused to die. The Germans wanted it forgotten, defeat in a lost war. The West ignored it because it complicated narratives of Soviet inevitability. For 80 years, this battle has been relegated to footnotes. Halbe Forest Cemetery holds 24,000 graves. Yet most people have never heard how those graves came to be filled, or why 55,000 empty graves were never dug. This is what happened when 100,000 trapped souls chose to fight through hell for survival. The mathematics said escape was impossible. The survivors proved mathematics wrong. Act 1. The trap closes. January 1945. The Red Army's final offensive toward Germany. Marshal Zhukov commanded 2.2 million men, 6,400 tanks, 7,100 aircraft. The goal? Reach Berlin before the Western Allies. General Theodor Busse's Ninth Army stood in the way. A career officer, 51 years old, Busse commanded 200,000 men cobbled together from depleted units. They held the Silo Heights, the last defensive position before Berlin. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. Against Busse's 200,000 men, 1.4 million Soviet soldiers, 6,250 tanks, 7,500 aircraft, 41,600 artillery pieces. On April 16, 1945, at 5 a.m., 8,983 Soviet artillery pieces opened fire simultaneously. The bombardment registered on seismographs in Sweden. Trees were uprooted, buildings collapsed, the earth screamed. Obergefreiter Wilhelm Altmann, 17 years old, pressed into a trench as the world ended. The noise was beyond comprehension, not individual explosions, but one continuous roar. We held because there was nowhere to run. The Battle of Silo Heights lasted 3 days. The Ninth Army inflicted 33,000 Soviet casualties and destroyed 700 tanks. But numbers prevailed. On April 19th, Soviet forces broke through. On April 21st, the trap closed. Konev's forces linked up with Zhukov south of Berlin. The Ninth Army, 200,000 soldiers plus 30,000 refugees, was encircled in the Spree forest. Soviet forces established a ring of steel. 3 armies, 280,000 men, received orders from Stalin. The encircled Ninth Army must be destroyed. Complete annihilation is required. Inside the pocket, chaos reigned. Ammunition, 3 days. Food, 2 days. Medical supplies, none, and mixed among the soldiers, 30,000 civilians. Women pushing baby carriages, elderly pulling handcarts, children separated from parents. Frau Margarete Promeist, mother of 3, clutched her children as artillery exploded. Her diary, April 22nd. We are trapped like animals. Our soldiers tell us to stay close, but I see the fear in their eyes. They know what the Russians will do if they catch us. My children ask when we can go home. I lie and say soon. On April 24th, Busse convened his commanders. General Major Helmuth Rehmann spoke bluntly. We have ammunition for 3 days, food for 2. The wounded are dying. The civilians are dying. If we remain here, we die slowly. If we surrender, soldiers go to Siberia and the women. He couldn't finish. Busse traced the map. North to Berlin is impossible. That leaves west. 8 miles through 3 Soviet armies. 8 miles where 130,000 people would fight through hell. The Americans are here, Busse pointed 40 miles west. If we reach them, we survive. It's our only chance. Oberst Wöhlemann spoke quietly. Herr General, you're ordering us to abandon Berlin. This is treason. Busse met his gaze. The Führer's order is impossible. Berlin cannot be relieved. I will not sacrifice 200,000 people for a symbolic gesture. We break west. One by one, the commanders nodded. Stay and die, or fight and possibly survive. Busse's final order. Tell the men, we fight not for Hitler, but for each other and for the civilians who depend on us. Every man who reaches American lines is a victory. That night, Soviet artillery pounded the pocket. In the forest, 130,000 people prepared for the most desperate gamble of the war. The mathematics said it was impossible, but mathematics don't account for desperation. Act 2. The Corridor of Death. April 26, 1945. 4:30 a.m. The attack began in silence. 11 SS Panzer Corps, 15,000 men, 40 tanks formed the spearhead. Objective, Halbe village, held by 8,000 Soviet troops. At 5 a.m., 80 German guns fired for 12 minutes. Then 15,000 soldiers attacked. Obersturmbannführer Rudolf Greschik led the assault. We advanced at a run. Speed was everything. We were among their positions before they could react. Close combat, grenades, bayonets. The village had to be taken within 1 hour. The fighting was apocalyptic. House-to-house combat. Buildings changed hands multiple times. Streets ran with blood. Soviet tanks counterattacked at 6:30 a.m. 15 T-34s. Unteroffizier Klaus Huber, 19, knocked out 3 from a basement window. The first tank came around a corner 20 meters away. I fired, hit the turret ring. The tank stopped burning. The second tank tried to reverse. I ran across the street, bullets everywhere, grabbed another Panzerfaust, fired from 10 meters. Then we ran because more were coming. By 8 a.m., Halbe was taken. Cost, 2,000 German casualties. The village was destroyed, 95% of buildings demolished. But the corridor was open. Busse ordered immediate exploitation. The entire pocket, 130,000 people, began moving westward. Frau Margarete Promeist, clutching her 3 children. Soldiers told us to move fast, not stop for anything. My youngest couldn't keep up. A soldier picked her up and carried her for 3 miles before shrapnel hit him. He handed her to another soldier before he died. I never knew his name. The corridor was half a mile wide, 8 miles long, the most dangerous ground in Europe. Soviet artillery rained down continuously. Katyusha rockets shrieked. Infantry attacked the flanks constantly. German rearguards formed hedgehogs, circular positions that held while the column moved. These units died buying minutes. Hauptmann Werner Göring held a crossroads for 4 hours. His final message at 3:45 p.m. "Am surrounded. Ammunition exhausted. Russians within 50 meters. Main column has passed. Mission accomplished. Tell my family I died well." His 450 men were annihilated. 11 survived, but the column had moved 2 miles. 450 lives bought 2 miles for 130,000 people. Soviet aircraft appeared at noon. Il-2 Sturmovix strafed with 23mm cannons. Unteroffizier Paul Schaefer. The planes came in low. The man next to me was cut in half. The column scattered, but they came back. When they left, I counted 73 bodies in 100 meters. The math was brutal. For every mile gained, 5,000 casualties. The corridor became carpeted with bodies so thick vehicles drove over corpses. By nightfall, April 26th, lead elements had advanced 3 miles. Behind them, 8,000 dead, 12,000 wounded. But 82,000 soldiers and 28,000 civilians were still moving. Busse's order: keep moving. No stopping. Speed is life. Anyone who stops dies. Through the night, the column moved by moonlight. Artillery never stopped. Men walked past friends who sat down and never got up. At 3 a.m. April 27th, Soviets launched a major counterattack at the corridor's base. 2 divisions attacked to seal it. General-Lieutenant Helmuth Weidling's V Corps, 8,000 men, held for 7 hours. His message to Busse: "They are trying to close the door. We are the door. We will hold." They did. Cost 3,000 casualties. But the corridor remained open. The mathematics of survival: Soviet advantages: 280,000 troops, 7,600 guns, unlimited ammunition, air superiority. German advantages: desperation, certain death if captured, possible survival moving west. Mobility: a moving target is harder to destroy. Mixed forces: Soviets reluctant to massacre civilians openly. The equation: for every German who died fighting westward, 2 might survive. For every German who surrendered, 0 would survive Soviet captivity. Soviet commanders could annihilate the pocket in 72 hours if Germans stayed in place. But Germans attacked westward with the energy of 130,000 people who knew movement meant life. Soviets faced a dilemma. Maximum firepower could destroy the column but would kill tens of thousands of civilians. Stalin was already thinking about occupation. Massacring civilians would complicate it. So Soviet commanders held back slightly. Not enough to let Germans escape easily, but enough that escape was possible. That slight restraint created the gap through which 55,000 would survive. April 27th dawn revealed the full horror. 8 miles of Hell's Highway, bodies everywhere, German and Russian mixed, soldiers and civilians. So many survivors described it as the road paved with corpses. Lieutenant Heinrich von Einsiedel: "We stopped counting at 2,000. Bodies on the road, in ditches, hanging in trees. We became immune. You step over bodies like logs. If you think of them as people, you go mad." The column had to cross the Dam River. The bridge was destroyed. Engineers built a makeshift crossing under fire. Hauptmann Gerhard Strippel: "We built that bridge under constant fire. Men were hit holding beams. We pushed their bodies aside. 43 engineers died. But 50,000 people crossed." Frau Promeist's diary, April 27th. Morning. Artillery hit ahead. Body parts in trees. My children saw. Afternoon. A soldier gave us his rations. He died that night. Gefreiter Hans Müller from Hamburg, 20 years old. Evening. An old woman died while we rested. We left her in a bomb crater. God forgive us. By nightfall, April 27th, lead elements reached Kummersdorf, 5 miles from the Elbe River. April 28th brought the heaviest fighting. Soviet 13th Army's entire artillery, 800 guns, fired 45,000 shells in 3 hours. The German assault began at noon. 4,000 men, 8 tanks, all that remained of the 11th SS Panzer Corps. SS Hauptsturmführer Werner Stiller. My battalion was 800 at Halbe. We took Kummersdorf with 74 survivors, but we took it. That evening, first Germans reached the Elbe River. They could see American positions on the western bank. Freedom. But the Elbe was 200 meters wide, running fast. No bridges, and 40,000 Germans were still fighting through the corridor. They had escaped the pocket. Now they had to cross the river. Act 3. The Crossing. April 29, 1945. The Elbe represented salvation, if they could cross. Americans had reached the Elbe on April 25th and stopped. Orders were explicit. The demarcation line agreed at Yalta made the Elbe the boundary. Americans would not cross eastward. But orders said nothing about preventing Germans from crossing westward. Oberst Wöhlemann organized the crossing. Engineers scavenged materials, wrecked vehicles, doors, anything that could float. They built rafts under Soviet fire. First crossings began at dawn, civilians first, women and children on makeshift rafts, soldiers swimming alongside, pushing them. Frau Promeist holding her 3 children. We were packed onto a raft, 20 people. It rode 6 inches above water. Soviet machine guns fired. Water erupted with bullet splashes. A woman next to me was hit, fell into the river. We couldn't stop. The current was strong. Soldiers kept pushing us, bullets hitting water around them. One soldier was hit, just sank. Another took his place. American soldiers watched in silence. They couldn't provide covering fire. That would be an act of war. But they could pull Germans from the water. Private James Wilson, U.S. 69th Infantry Division. They came across on anything that could float. Russians shooting at them the whole time. Women, kids, old people. We pulled them out. Some were wounded, all exhausted. Some women couldn't believe we were helping. They'd been told Americans would shoot them, but they were just people trying to survive. The crossing continued 3 days. By May 1st, 25,000 soldiers and 30,000 civilians had reached American lines. But 5,000 died making that final crossing, drowned, shot, or succumbing to wounds within sight of salvation. General Busse crossed April 30th, one of the last officers to escape. He stood on the western bank, watching his soldiers still fighting on the eastern side. The corridor was finally sealed. His final order, to all commands, 9th Army. Mission complete. You have fought with honor. You have saved thousands. Break contact and save yourselves. Every man who survives is a victory. Busse out. The Battle of Halbe officially ended May 1st, 1945. Hitler was dead. Berlin had surrendered. The war had 6 more days. The statistics of Halbe are staggering, yet largely unknown. German casualties, 40,000 killed, 20,000 captured, 15,000 died after reaching safety. German survivors, 25,000 soldiers, 30,000 civilians. Total, 55,000 from 130,000. Soviet casualties, never officially acknowledged. German estimates, 5,000 to 10,000. The exchange rate was catastrophic. 5 Germans died for every 4 who survived. But compared to surrender, Siberian camps where 90% died, the breakout saved more lives than it cost. For decades, the battle was deliberately forgotten. Soviets suppressed it. Embarrassing that surrounded Germans escaped. East Germany banned discussion. West Germany wanted to forget war's final horrors. Halbe Forest today, 24,000 graves, many marked unknown. The forest is still dangerous. Unexploded ordnance kills civilians occasionally even now. Only after 1990, reunification did historians fully document Halbe. Survivors spoke. Mass graves were marked. Archives opened. General Busse survived, released in 1947. In a 1972 interview, asked if he regretted disobeying Hitler, "I saved 55,000 lives by disobeying. If that's treason, I'm a traitor. But I sleep well at night." Frau Promeist and her 3 children survived. Her diary, donated in 1985, remains one of the most detailed civilian accounts. Her final entry, May 2nd. "We are alive. I don't know how. The soldier who carried my daughter, I never learned his name. Gefreiter Hans Müller, I found his family and told them he was a hero. The hundreds who died holding flanks, their names are lost, but their sacrifice is not. The soldiers at Halbe weren't fighting for Nazi ideology. Most were conscripts. They knew what Soviet soldiers did to German civilians. the same things German soldiers had done to Soviet civilians. The cycle of atrocity that defined the Eastern Front. The breakout was not a heroic stand for a righteous cause. It was desperate survival warfare, but also a testament to soldiers who chose to save civilians, to commanders who valued lives over ideology. Epilogue, May 1995. Halbe Forest Cemetery, 50 years after the battle. Karl-Heinz Stottmeister, who commanded a company and survived with 11 men from 180, stood among white crosses. Beside him, Frau Promeist, now 84, with her 3 children and 11 grandchildren. Stottmeister spoke. These graves represent 2 numbers. 24,000 who died, so 55,000 could live. We don't gather to celebrate victory. There was none. We remember the price. They died so we could live. A Soviet veteran, former pilot Viktor Petrov, approached. For 50 years, I thought you were demons. Today I see you were desperate men protecting desperate people. We were all trapped by that war. They shook hands over graves of men they'd tried to kill. Frau Promeist placed flowers on a grave marked unknown soldier and told her grandchildren, this could be the soldier who carried your mother, or gave us food, or built the bridge, or any of the thousands who died so we could live. Remember them. The only way we repay them is to make sure they're never forgotten. That's the only victory Halbe produced, memory surviving when history tried to erase it. The mathematics said complete annihilation. 7 days later, 55,000 had escaped through 3 Soviet armies. The Soviets buried the story, the Germans buried it, the West ignored it. For 80 years, 24,000 graves in Halbe Forest have held the only truth. Sometimes the mathematics of desperation defeat the mathematics of war. They said escape was impossible. History erased them for proving everyone wrong. But the forest remembers, the graves remember, and now you remember too. 100,000 trapped. 40,000 died, 55,000 escaped through hell itself. The largest breakout in military history, and history forgot them because nobody was supposed to survive. But they did survive. And their story screams across 80 years of silence. The past doesn't just speak. It screams, and in Halbe Forest in April 1945, it screamed for 7 days until the world finally listened. This has been Echoes of Time Unfolded. Subscribe for more stories that echo through eternity. The past is never truly past.